Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Radical Center podcast. As you could tell, I'm not Noka Dakrup. I am Cody Vatcher, and Noka Dakrup is here with our special guest, who I will introduce in a second. Welcome to our podcast. And as I said, today we are pleased to welcome Celina Caesar. In 2015, she was elected to serve as the MP for Whitby. She was appointed to serve as parliamentary secretary to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in December of 2015. Since leaving Parliament 19, she has become a vocal advocate, sharing her experience as a Black woman in the Trudeau cabinet and government as a whole. And with the recent drama unfolding in Ottawa, we have one of those people who has worked closest with the Prime Minister. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Celina. How are you, Celina?
I am good. Thank you for having me.
We're excited to have you with us today, and we're going to get right into it. But I just wanted to say that, our last episode was supposed to be the last episode of the year, and we had planned, we're going to take some time off. But this week has been something. It was just not possible. And we're so excited that we actually have Celina with us here to, talk about what's going on, talk about what you expect for the future, but also tell us a little bit about your story, your experience, what it was like. And being a young woman who was in politics for a while and, certainly has a huge appetite for politics, I'm so excited to have you here with us. Cody, I'll let you get started.
Yeah, so I just want to start off really simple, really easy, and I just wanted to ask you, why is it that you decided to run for office in the first place?
So, thank you. Thank you to you. Thank you to your listeners. Thank you for using this platform as a way to have some discourse about the political state or the Canada, but more importantly, I think it's connected to geopolitical issues globally. I will make one small change to my introduction, and that is that I left as a liberal in March of 2015. So I sat as an independent, even though there was maybe from March 2015 to March 2019 to October 2019, I sat as an independent. And that was just to send a message. And I really want that to be underscored because I didn't leave government as a liberal. I left as an independent. And it leads to the question why I decided to run. I decided to run because my favorite love is this little model behind me, for anybody who's listening. It's a model of the brain. I'm a neuroscientist. I like to study the brain. I've studied the brain for quite some time. And before I got into politics, I was co-chairing Canada's first national epidemiology study on neurological conditions. I was working with researchers across the country, the Public Health Agency of Canada, and charities like Alzheimer's societies, Parkinson, epilepsy, looking at health services, scope, impact, and risk factors for all of those conditions and trying to see what were the commonalities. And the commonalities that we were seeing was that people were struggling. People would divorce their partner if they made a little bit too much money so that they could drop below the threshold so their partner could get access to services in a G7 country. People would have to move from province to province if one drug wasn't covered under a formulary so they could get a drug covered on another. And I just thought that's not what I thought would happen with people, but it was something that I wanted to do something about. So I went into government in 2015 with a liberal government because I knew that they had an approach that appeared fresh and exciting. And I wanted to build on that. I wanted to go in there to have a national brain strategy and a national senior strategy because every dollar that we invest in brain research has a $4 return. And so that's why I decided to run, but that's not what happened when I got there.
That's not what happened when you got there. So, let's get right into it. Celina, when did you start recognizing or thinking, you know what, maybe this isn't what I thought it was going to be. Maybe I'm not going to have the opportunities that, I had hoped I would. All of us, we get into this field because we want to make change, right? So when did you
Yeah.
start thinking, hey, maybe something's wrong here?
Yeah, and everybody wants to make change, and that's a very altruistic sort of purpose to be in there. And we have to recognize that government doesn't move fast. And people used to say to me all the time, "Well, government doesn't move fast, Celina, it doesn't move fast." And so we had a pandemic, and we saw how fast government can actually move. So let's just call BS on that. They move fast when they want to, and they don't move fast when they don't. And so I started recognizing maybe on the first day or the first month of getting there, where the prime minister announced his cabinet, and it was a gender paired cabinet, and he said that this is the face of Canada. And at the time, there was no Black individuals or representation from Black communities within that cabinet. And that wasn't the point for me. The point for me was during the meeting that I had with him, he appointed me as his parliamentary secretary. And I went into that meeting and I said, if you are having me as your parliamentary secretary to fit any gender or racial gap that you saw in your cabinet, I'm not the one. Like, I could do my job as member of parliament. I don't want to be a token in your whatever. And so he said, no, of course not. You that's not the role that you would have. And of course, over the next year, I recognized very quickly that my proposal for a brain strategy and a senior strategy was not even looked at. I have 2 MBAs for a reason. I'm very thorough when it comes to business and presenting proposals that have a return on investment, that have all the research and all the data. And so I put it together. It wasn't even looked at. And I was only invited internationally. And you have to remember, Trudeau in 2016 was doing tons of international events. And as his parliamentary secretary, you're sort of like a tag team. He goes left, you go right. He goes north, you go south. And I was only invited to 3 events, and they were all Black facing events. I was invited to the White House state dinner, but I wasn't invited to eat dinner. It was just a prop. And then I was invited to the opening of the National African American Museum. And then I was invited to attend the inauguration of President Akufo-Addo in Ghana. And it was very striking to me at that moment that I was there for a year as the parliamentary secretary to a prime minister only because I had boobs and I had dark skin. And so I resigned as parliamentary secretary to the prime minister in December of 2016.
Yeah, and that's really, really painful, right? Especially as a woman, brilliant, 2 MBAs, neuroscientist, you've done all this work, you have all this credibility, and then, you find yourself in a position where, one, you're not really able to make much change because, they're not giving you the opportunity to do so. And as you said, like, government's slow and they have their own priorities, and we all know how government kind of works. But also recognizing that maybe in a way I'm being used.
Oh, not maybe. The evidence.
I was trying
I
to
always
be
bring the receipts. There's no maybe here.
I didn't want to put words in your mouth.
No.
Go ahead, Cody.
Yeah, so I get the impression from you, and I listened to when the Jordan Peterson podcast came out. I listened to it in full, and then I listened to it again today in full. And I get the impression that when you came into politics, you're not a political person. You didn't necessarily get into politics to play that game. And it seems like, I called the prime minister out last week on his faux feminist mantra when he was talking about Kamala Harris. It seems that your experience validates what a lot of people, including yourself, Jody Wilson-Raybould, Jane Philpott, and now we'll get to it, but Crystia Freeland has been saying, is that he's not really a feminist. But my interesting perspective that I take from all of this is it doesn't come from a position of politics, right? This is actually how you feel. This is your story, right?
Yeah, so it's not my job to tell the prime minister to say whether he's a feminist or not. Don't care. Usually, if you are a feminist, you act it more than you have to say it. So, and he says it all the time. So I'll leave that to him to figure out why he needs
We'll
to
leave it to the
convince
pundits. They can deal with the labels.
people of what he is or is not. But I did not get into politics to have a political, lifeline. I actually wanted to stay in there for 1 or 2 terms. It wasn't about the pension. It was about the work that I knew I could do for the people of Whitby and beyond Whitby. I was very clear about that. And so getting into government with a feminist agenda, with a diversity is our strength agenda. I really thought that that was intersectional feminism at its best, where we were looking out for not just, and I hope people understand that when we talk about intersectional feminism, we're not talking about just looking after women of color. We're looking after the poorest and most vulnerable among us in our society. We're trying to say, let's understand, based on our intersecting identities, who is going to be left behind as we are progressing as a society. And if we understand their needs, then the rising tide lifts all boats kinds of things. We need to understand that. So going in, knowing full well that I was there as someone who was incredibly intelligent, had all of this business acumen, research acumen behind me, had all of these different skills that I knew could lend itself into a very specific niche within the government. I wanted to go in there to really create change. And, the data around this is really quite apparent and evident. And it's some work done by someone named Cantor, Kanter, for your listeners, that say that when you don't have a critical mass in an organization, so you don't have a critical mass of women, say, for example, in a government, or you don't have a critical mass of Black women like myself. I was the only Black woman elected in the second parliament, not just in our government, but out of 338 people. You tend to be pigeonholed into where people want you to be, as opposed to where you are actually useful based on your intellect and your skills and your experience. So I was pushed into this hole about talking about race. And I was just like, that's not why I'm here. I'm here because I want to talk about the brain. I want seniors to live better lives, who are often women, who are caregivers, who have to divorce their spouse or to figure out how they're going to pay for their medications. I want that for Canadians. I want that for them. And it didn't end up happening. And it really, and I think Jody Wilson-Raybould says this a lot too, I felt duped. I felt like I was sold a particular brand of something, and then got in there and was really, almost, as I said, on the first day, eyes wide open. Oh my God, this is not what we're getting. We're not getting a feminist agenda. We're not getting a diversity is our strength agenda. We're getting hashtags and sound bites, and that does not serve Canadians well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see, I think that's shared now by many Canadians. Sorry to interrupt, Cody. That idea that we were sold this idea of what the Liberal brand under Trudeau would be. And now you even hear from Liberals, it's public information. I used to be a very active member of the Liberal Party. And it's almost like, Liberals are unable to recognize this party anymore. And totally identify with the word duped as well. Celina, if you could pinpoint a moment, if there was one particular moment where you said, that's enough, I'm going to walk away, what would that be? Because you said, as an independent, that takes courage.
God, that was the most fearful moment of my life, sitting in that, like, in Independence Corner all by myself for the first little while. But I do want to just go back a little bit. Liberals not recognizing the party is, who cares at the end of the day? It's the fact that Canadians who expected something from their government is not going to get what they paid for with their trust, what they paid for with their vote. And yes, we could rhyme off $10 a day healthcare. Yes, that works. Dental care, that works. But the fiscal state that the country is in, and I don't really want to get in between, like, a conservative or a liberal agenda here, but the fact that people are worrying about how their groceries are going to be paid, their housing expenses, things that are really, really concerning, especially now around the holidays. It is very important for our government to not be having gimmicky little GST or $200 check things that are going out that are not going to have long-term stability for Canadians. But if I could pinpoint a moment where I just said enough, it was actually in 2017. It was coming out of that year of being parliamentary secretary, actually having a couple of conversations about things that I thought were really important besides the brain, that just fell flat. Nobody was listening to. And I said, you know what? I'm not, I mean, they're going to talk about me anyway. I might as well give them something good to talk about. And the gloves came off, and I decided that I was going, if they've I'm going to resign. I resigned as parliamentary secretary. I said that already. I got appointed to international development. Love that job, but I wasn't just going to be a puppet. I started rewriting my speeches. I started speaking up louder, clearer in French and English, talking to the people of Whitby, talking to constituents that I know wanted to hear that voice. And I really took seriously the reason why I was there and how I got there. And that was for the people. The people were the reason why I was there, and that is how I got there. And I knew that if I served them well, if I maintained their trust, that they would forgive me for whatever happened at the end of it. So if I stayed for a term or two terms, they would forgive me. But 2017, and that September of 2017, I just said, you know what? That's it. I'm going to play according to Celina's rules, because you have to remember that the parliament was not built for us. I'm not looking at Cody right now, but it wasn't built for us. You know, we got our first women's washroom in the parliament in the center of our democracy in 1984. So
Wow.
the rules that say that we should be seen and not heard, be seen, be heard, stand up, because if you don't stand up for the things that you believe in, you'll fall for anything. And at that point, I knew that there were people in Canada who needed a voice that would say, no, you are doing wrong. You could do better. And it wasn't necessarily about, doing wrong. I change that a little bit. It was about doing better. This whole better is always possible. Do you remember that? Where did that go?
Mm-hmm.
Where did better is always possible go? And I wanted better. I wanted what I signed up for. I wanted a government that would stand up for the little person. That's what I want.
So if we fast forward today, uh, earlier this week, Crystia Freeland resigned from cabinet. Her letter was scathing, to say the least, and she said that the Prime Minister, quote, no longer wanted me to serve as your finance minister and offered me another position in the cabinet. Close. Tell us what your first reactions were.
Oh my God. It was like deja vu all over again. I felt, so for your listeners who probably don't know, same thing happened in 2019 with me and Jody Wilson-Raybould in particular. It's 100% identical. But this idea that, you challenge the prime minister on an issue and he demotes you, or he gets upset, or, it's a totally toxic workplace. So I just immediately felt deja vu. I texted Jane Philpott. I'm like, is this happening all over again? Like, because it was so surreal. I think, Cody, that the challenge here is that the consequences in 2024 of those actions versus 2019 are a lot more dire because of our economic positioning in Canada, especially for those who are most vulnerable, but also on the eve of the election of a US president who is threatening 25% tariffs that are going to further disenfranchise and negatively impact people that need government the most. The thinking of a prime minister to know, he must have known that Chrystia Freeland would not just take this lying down. He must have known that Canadians would have been like, what? Even if she said yes, they would have been like, huh? How are you switching finance ministers right before Christmas? What? That is not making any sense. And considering the fact that Chrystia Freeland has been a loyal foot soldier for the last 10 years is absolutely ludicrous. And so I felt deja vu, but then I immediately switched gears and thought, oh my gosh, there are a lot of Canadians who are going to be in big trouble.
And the fact that he was also trying to replace her with someone who's not even elected, doesn't even have a seat, right?
Yeah, so that quickly left very quickly. I don't think Mark Carney would have stepped a foot into that. But the other interesting thing is that Dominic LeBlanc is there, right?
But they don't even know. People were putting out tweets and they're like, where's Mark Carney? Where's Mark Carney? And some people are saying he's out of the country because he's like, I'm not touching this bullshit. Like,
Yes.
right? Like
Why
with
would
a
you?
10-foot pole, right?
Yeah. Why would you? You don't want to touch it. And you know what? I think the other thing that people need to sort of consider, and I mentioned it last night. I haven't mentioned it anywhere else to public. I'll mention it here for your consideration. But Dominic LeBlanc was in Mar-a-Lago at the dinner a couple weeks ago. Why? Why was he there? So it's almost like this whole thing was a setup. Like everybody, like they knew what was happening, and it's almost as if they were told, "Don't bring Crystia to this dinner because of her Ukrainian background, because of her connections or ill connections with Russia, because of her journalism days." I think that there was a lot more here that we don't know, and if we're now taking instructions from Trump as to who is our finance minister and who's not, that's a sad state for the first state of Canada and Gov-
Governor Trudeau. That joke is never going to go away.
never. Well, considering it was just tweeted again 2 days ago.
Yeah, for sure. Celina, you mentioned that, it was deja vu for you. And I've heard you tell a story on in other interviews where you met with the prime minister. You had, I think it was the time when you were trying to say, I can't be your parliamentary secretary anymore. And, you tried to set some boundaries, I would call that. And it didn't go well.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you, I guess, tell us a little bit about that and how you felt walking out of that meeting?
No, it was actually in 2019. It was March of 2019, and nobody would know this story if SNC Lavalin didn't happen. But I'll tell the story, and then I'll connect the dot. In March of 2019, I had enough. 2017, I made the decision that I was going to just do my own thing. But so many things happened after that I just said, you know what, I'm not running again. I'll serve one term, no problem. I called the prime minister as a courtesy to tell him that I wasn't running. And at the time, SNC Lavalin, former Minister of Justice and Attorney General, was being pressured to help SNC Lavalin. That was illegal. And he said to me, I can't have two strong women of color leave at the same time. And I was, we went back and forth a little bit, and he started to reprimand me like I was a child, yelling on the phone. And the only reason that I actually give description of this was a call that was made on the prime minister's line. So I know there's a recording somewhere, and he has never come out and disputed that this has happened. So I say it with full confidence. So he starts yelling, "You should be respectful of me, and you should all the things that I've done for you." And I was just like, "Fuck." Sorry, I don't know if I can swear on
It's
the
okay.
show.
Okay.
Do it.
No, go
Let
ahead.
it flow. Let it flow.
Go ahead.
Think you're talking to. Like, it was bizarre to me. And then I just, after that, I was just
You're like, now I'm
full
really done.
full cuss words. Yeah, now it was like, now the black girl came out of me. I was like cussing and I swear like a sailor, like a dirty sailor. But that
I
night,
work construction, so I
yeah,
understand.
that
Every
night,
other word is a swear word.
that night, every word was a swear
Yeah.
word, believe me. And so, nobody would have known about that until the day, and for your listeners, after the whole thing that went down with SNC Lavalin and the Minister of Justice Jody Wilson-Raybould, Trudeau came out and tried to give this apology, saying that he has a warm and welcoming office. And I was just like, I sent out a tweet again, and I was just like, no, that's not how you respond to people. Do you remember our meeting? And I knew as soon as I sent that, like, it would just blow up. But I couldn't, again, going back to our earlier conversation, I couldn't just sit there and watch him lie and know full well that that was not the truth, number one. And two, not stand up for Jody in that moment because he was making her look like she was lying. And that part for me was like, oh, hell no, not on my watch. And again, it is important for listeners, especially our younger listeners, irrespective of gender or race or anything else, like, just to know where your values stand, where your principles stand. Because again, if you, in that moment where you can make a decision to do something that is going to cost you maybe your career, which it did me, or stand up for your values, do that all the time. Don't do a marginal cost analysis and say, yeah, this one time I won't do it. Don't do that. Stand in your values and principles all the time.
For sure. And that's beautifully said. We see some of those themes now with him, right? Like, I mean, this whole week has been a disaster, and it's only Wednesday, and he's still going to events. He had the holiday party yesterday. He had another event the day before, and he had a caucus meeting, and he's still going about his day as if it's business as usual, as nothing happened. And we see the same themes you're talking about now in the public. We see, I'm going to call it what it is, arrogance, entitlement. Nobody can touch me. I'm not going. Basically, he doesn't look like he plans to go anywhere, right? What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, I brought up the Mar-a-Lago situation because this is exactly what I think is going to happen. So you go to Mar-a-Lago, they say don't bring Crystia. You do as he says because you don't have a backbone. You bring Dominic LeBlanc. All of a sudden, boom, 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 Dominic LeBlanc is the Minister of Finance. You say all this the day before the House rises for the Christmas break. What's going to happen after Christmas where everybody has a bandwidth of 140 characters? We're going to likely forget, right? We're going to likely forget. And look, I hate making predictions, but what I'm thinking is that he's going to come back after the holidays. And if he doesn't immediately resign, he's going to make a play to look like him and Trump are neck and neck, are tightest, thickest sleeves, so that he is the one that is able to handle Trump in the next administration. I think this is a bigger play for him of being the person that could sit side by side with Trump. You saw the picture at Mar-a-Lago, the dinner, like, everybody looking the thickest sleeves. I think that that's the position that he wants to be in. And Chrystia Freeland was the easy casualty of that. He wants it to be business as usual because he needs to settle the dust on this as quickly as possible, regain the confidence of the US administration, tighten up the borders. You saw that in the fall economic statement, and make sure that everybody forgets about this before January 8th, the inauguration of the new president of the United States. And then he'll go along as his new buddy in the White House. And if it doesn't go that way, I'll be very surprised if he comes back and says he's going to resign. But has anybody seen him yet?
No.
No, yesterday, just at the holiday party, he gave a speech.
Yeah, you
It's like a
finally
family meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, you haven't seen your prime minister. How do you not do that? Everybody's in an economic free fall in this country. 25% tariffs are on the way, and you don't say anything to the Canadians after your finance minister leaves.
Yeah, he canceled all his year-end interviews. I'll let you go ahead, Cody.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would just say, like, the letter itself, like, it would be comical if it wasn't so scary. Like, the chaos and the message that it sent
Yeah,
to our country and the rest of the world is that our government is totally out of control, and our country is being made a mockery of in the form of these Trump tweets because of our fake feminist prime minister wanting to cling to power. And the thing is, like, in 2019, Justin Trudeau was handed a minority. In 2021, he was handed polling that would suggest that he would get his majority back, and that didn't work out. So now it's one of those things where you almost have to try and get into the head of somebody who's self-centered, egotistical, and just is trying to cling on to power as long as possible. And the one thing that I heard today, which really scared me, is that you're right. If we go on Christmas holidays, he has his vacation, whatever, he comes back and it's still a thing, then he just prorogues Parliament. And then those MPs who are threatening to quit or threatening not to show up for no confidence votes, there is not going to be a vote because he can prorogue Parliament pretty much as long as he wants.
that's correct. That's correct.
But he
And
can't
there
avoid
is
an
a lot of
election
power.
forever.
Sorry, go ahead.
He can't avoid an election forever, and he's not gaining any popularity in the polls.
And I think Trump might be his golden ticket, but I think also we have to remember too, when you talk about clinging on to power, we knew that this was his play. Go back to 2015 or 2014. This is the last first past the post election. This is the last first past the how many times did he say that? At least like several dozen times on national TV. Why do we not have that when why do we still have the same electoral system when we had a majority government in that from 2015 to 2019? If we wanted to change it, we could have. We didn't. Why? Because it allows him to stay in power. Like that's why we keep going oscillating between conservative and liberal. It just allows that system to stay in place. So clinging on to power, like what? That's been his play from day one. As soon
Hmm.
as he got in that chair and was like, oh, this is comfy, we knew that was going to happen. And then trying to make people spin electoral of reform ended up, you know, harming Maryam Monsef. But, you know, he's still there. So that's all that matters.
Sure. I have one last question. I think if Cody, you don't have anything else, but I'll let you.
No, I don't have anything else.
So, do you feel, because your story was quite early on, and Jodi's story was quite early on, and Jane's story was quite early on, and then you have another story and another story, and it just keeps going and going. Now with Crystia Freeland, and her being the deputy prime minister and her being the finance minister, and all this chaos that's just basically landed in his lap, do you feel vindicated?
So I wasn't expecting that question.
Yeah. Well, sorry, vindication might not be the word that you
Yeah, it may not be
use.
the word. What's the word I'm looking for?
Yeah.
No, I think it's the word. It's
Yeah.
the word, yeah. And it actually made me a little emotional to
Yeah.
when you said it. So you would bear with me for a moment, but I didn't need the vindication, but it felt good. You know what I mean? Like I didn't need someone to tell me that what I was saying all these years was right. I know because I experienced it. And it's something that I hope, irrespective of gender, and I don't mean it to again to not speak to you, Cody, but to speak to to speak to you, to just say like, I hope you never have to experience what it's like to be in this position, to feel vindicated, because it means that you've gone through years. This is 5 years now that I'm like always looking over my shoulders. Do people really believe me? Do they believe what I say? Like all these things. Do they think like I just hate him? I don't hate him. I don't like I don't like what happened. But like I'll have a beer with the guy. I don't care. But it's that feeling of I don't know. It's me too, you know? Like we claim to want to believe women. We claim to want to like support them. We claim to want to do all these things when it's convenient. But when it's inconvenient, it's easy to just to Jody Wilson-Raybould, to Jane Philpott, to Leona Alice-Lev, to Eva Nessef, to Maryam Monsef, to Chrystia Freeland, to Celina Caesar-Chavannes,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that is what is the hardest part of this, is that you sit for years and you think, did they really believe me? And even now, do they still really believe me? And that's hard. That is a hard place to be. So while I could say yes, I feel vindication, I never really needed it because I knew what I was saying was true. I wouldn't ruin my whole career over a lie about some guy who was way more powerful than me. It doesn't make any sense.
And I think one of the things that I mentioned off the top of the show as well, and that I really wanted to get to, what I see in you is a lot different than what I see from the rest of the women who's been affected, because I feel that your perspective comes more from a human level rather than a political level. And I think that has much more power and much more value to set an example for the people of this country.
And I really appreciate that, Cody, because like I could have just been quiet this entire time. Nobody would have known about the conversation I had with the prime minister. Nobody would have known anything. I didn't have to support Jody. I didn't have to be one of the first people to be out vocal with Jody, right? I didn't have to be one of the first people to say, no, I'm not going to wait until the liberals throw me out of their stupid caucus. I'm out of here. Like, I didn't have to wait. I didn't wait because I knew it didn't align with the values that I had. And I'm not speaking ill of anybody else's values. I don't know what anybody else's values are. All I know is for me, in those moments where I had to make those decisions of they were impactful. I didn't work for a year after I left government. I didn't work from October 2019 to October 2020. It cost me financially, and I knew that that was going to happen. And still, your values, your principles, if they don't guide you in every single decision that you make, and I don't care what they are yours, and they are yours alone, and they can't be like, oh well, I would do something different. Oh good, go ahead, run, be in government, and then do something different. I don't give a fuck. But don't tell me what my principles are and how they're supposed to be aligned or misaligned with yours. I am me, and I am going to stand in the way that I know I can look myself in the mirror, in the same way that you could stand and look yourself in the mirror. Just make sure that you're able to do that in an authentic way, not guided by somebody else's principles, but guided by your own.
And thank you very much for sharing that. And thank you so much for joining us today. And we can really only hope that one day our political spaces, including political parties, all of them, not just the Liberal Party, will be actually as welcoming as they would like to market themselves to be, especially to women, and especially to women of color who, generally have it harder than everybody else.
100%. Yeah.
So, I tell the story. A friend of mine once told me when I first got involved in politics, he said to me, you're a woman of color, which means you're going to have to work harder than everybody else, and you're never going to get the credit that you deserve. That's just how it works. Yeah. And just knowing that that's the reality of our political spaces is just heartbreaking. But we carry on, we continue. Right. Yes. Don't quit, and we learn from examples like yourselves who set an example.
Yes.
Who make it very clear of what's acceptable and what's not, and that's how progress is made. So I want you to know that you have made a difference.
Thank you.
I take this stand.
That was the end of my book. That's how I ended my book. I said, like, just run. Take all the lessons that I've given to you. I haven't been shy about my experiences. Take those lessons, add them to yours, and run. Have the great people around you that support each other in this endeavor. It's where change is made, is inside those halls. So I'm not discouraging anybody. I want you to run like wolves, run like you're hungry.
One day. I'll let Cody go first.
So you mentioned your book. Can you please tell everybody your book and where you could buy it?
Yeah, thank you. Can You Hear Me Now? Available wherever books are sold, or on Celina CC, CELINACC.ca/book.
Beautiful. Noka, do you have anything else that you'd like to say?
No, that's all. I just want to thank you again for joining us and for taking the time, especially on such short notice. Things kind of got a little bit exciting this week. And I want to say thank you to our listeners. We hope you enjoyed this episode. We're going to keep bringing you more exciting and more interesting content. We're going to try to stay on top of what's going on in Canadian politics and in provincial politics in Ontario. And we hope you join us again. And this time we are going to sign off for the new year. Until the new year. Right, Cody? We're going to come back next week.
I don't know. Maybe. We'll see what happens.
The way things are going. Have me back next week. I'll be like your third guest.
Yeah.
We might give you another call.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you to you and your listeners.
Thank you.